mean, when you look at, first of all, food costs, 80% of every aspect of producing food requires fossil fuels, whether it's the fertilizer, whether it's the equipment to harvest the grain or do the seeding or dry the grain, whether it's taking the transportation to market, or even whether it's the grocery stores and how they're heated and powered. Every aspect of that has a fossil fuel attached to it, and so you're just compounding the cost. That's part of the reason why we have a crisis right now in the increase year over year in food. I want our movement in Alberta to stay united. I've been responsible in the past for seeing it divided, and I sure like it when our Conservative family is together under one roof. I think that is the pathway to success.
Yeah, I hope that the party is sober-minded.
From where we're sitting, it looks an awful lot like one more attempt to divide our country, to reward one region and punish another. And we're not going to sit back and let this unfair carve-out disadvantage Albertans for another winter. And so I'm pleased to announce that this morning, Alberta filed an application for a judicial review of the exemption in the federal court. We're asking the court to declare the exemption both unconstitutional and unlawful. We hope that this will force Ottawa to recognize the burden the carbon tax places on Canadians and eliminate the tax altogether. Albertans know we've got their backs on this. Our government has been fighting the federal carbon tax since 2019.
Well, that was Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announcing a constitutional challenge to Justin Trudeau's idea to give a special carbon tax break, but only to certain parts of Canada where they use home heating oil, as opposed to Western Canada and other places where they primarily use natural gas. Joining us now to talk about this is the Premier herself, Danielle Smith. What a pleasure to have you on the show, Premier. Thanks for taking the time.
Nice to see you, Ezra.
Well, it's a great thing to sue Ottawa. I think it should be the pastime of many premiers, especially when you have an overreaching federal government that's mucking around in business that's not its own. Tell me the theory behind the Alberta lawsuit at the federal court that you just filed.
Well, as you know, we have been fighting against the retail carbon tax since the UCP got elected. They launched, first of all, they eliminated it. And then, of course, Justin Trudeau came in and put it in any case. And then we ended up going to court. And unfortunately, we lost. And we lost, I believe, because what the court looked at is that they didn't really disagree with the need to do something about reducing emissions. And the attitude was, well, if Ottawa's going to do this and you're going to do nothing, then I'll side with Ottawa. And Ottawa was making arguments about how they needed to be able to set a floor price across the entire country. They made it sound like only the national government could do this to make sure that everyone was treated fairly. Well, then they just blew that argument completely out of the water by giving a carve-out to essentially those in Eastern Canada that use home heating oil, which is the most polluting, most emitting type of fuel. And so they've blown their argument up on a number of fronts. First of all, the fairness argument, that's gone. Second of all, trying to dissuade people from using the most polluting fuels, that one's gone. And thirdly, they wanted to make sure that they were giving some support because of the cost at the same time as they've been arguing that their carbon tax doesn't increase the cost of everything. So we feel that because not only is it breaking their own law, they have a Greenhouse Gas Emissions Act, but we also think it's unconstitutional, and we're prepared to fight it out.
Well, there's one more thing, is when the Liberals announced they were going to give that tax break just to that region's primary choice of energy, their rationale was it was to lower taxes on people, to save money, which I think gives away the game. They used to say, oh, no, you got to eat your spinach. You need this to save the world. This is about reducing greenhouse gases, as if you can change the weather with a tax. But I think that they gave it away when they said, no, this is about tax relief. So that rationale you talked about earlier, the court saying, well, we got to do something. It's like the Liberals have conceded this is just a political bauble to bargain away for some regional votes.
Well, and you have to remember, it was posed to me if I wondered if that was the case. And you have to remember that years ago, Atlantic Canada voted 100% for the Liberals, and it's not looking that way for them now. And so I would hate to think that the federal Liberals would make a decision of this magnitude for simple vote buying and for politics. But in the absence of a good argument, which I hope that they will be able to make in court, I think that this exemption has to be struck down. They've got to treat everybody fairly. And what we're aiming for is to have the entire retail carbon tax struck down. We've already seen it is not doing anything to reduce emissions. All it is punitive. It's making the cost of transportation fuel, home heating, electricity go nothing but up. And those are the base fuels for every single thing we buy. So it's increased the cost of everything. In the middle of an affordability crisis, they should be eliminating it.
You know, I saw in your remarks today, you didn't go to war against other provinces. You sort of said, well, you guys are lucky to have this tax cut. Can we get some of that too? Here's a clip of you earlier today.
I've sent texts to both Premier Eby as well as Premier Moe congratulating them on returning to office. I told Premier Eby I'm looking forward to working with him collaboratively on some of the energy files that we've been talking about together, building out the hydrogen economy, exporting ammonia, getting more export capacity for LNG. And I spoke with Premier Moe about potentially considering joining this case. So we'll see what he's already demonstrated that he believes that the federal government is treating his province unfairly. He acted in a bit of a different way than we did, and I hope that he's able to join this case as soon as he gets his cabinet sworn in.
How has your lawsuit been received by other provinces? Maybe it's too early to get feedback on it. For example, Saskatchewan just re-elected Premier Scott Moe, who has also been very vocal against the carbon tax and this regional favoritism. Do you think there's a possibility that other premiers will get on board? And also, do you think some of those Atlantic premiers might say, no, hey, Alberta, shut up, don't mess up a good thing? Like, what are the other provinces saying with your lawsuit?
I'll be seeing them in a couple of months' time because we're going for a Council of the Federation meeting. I can tell you that what I've found at the Premier's table is everybody wants to get treated fairly by the federal government. Everybody's upset with federal overreach. And even in the case of those provinces that are benefiting right now, it's only a 3-year reprieve. And so they're going to be facing exactly what everybody else is facing within a couple of years' time. So I would hope that others would see that this is not the pathway to reduce emissions. We believe the pathway to reduce emissions is through technology, innovation, as well as exporting our cleaner burning fuels internationally to reduce emissions elsewhere. That should be the formula that Canada follows, as opposed to continually putting in punitive measures that is disadvantaging one region over another.
Premier Scott Moe has been very vigorous on this, but Premier David Eby, who also just was reelected in a squeaker, he has been in the past a very vocal supporter of the carbon tax. Where is he now? And I'm sure you gave him a quick congratulatory call or something. Where does he stand on this issue? Has he sort of had second thoughts because the voters gave him a bit of an attitude adjustment?
I think I've watched a little bit of his commentary since getting reelected, and it was a squeaker. And he said, we received a message from British Columbians, and there were two major policy reversals that he had. One was on the issue of the carbon tax, and the other was on the issue of compassionate care for those who are suffering in the throes of addiction. So I think those are two issues where he heard loud and clear he had to switch course on. You even saw it in Saskatchewan. The Saskatchewan NDP leader, who also gained ground in this last election, was talking about eliminating the carbon tax or fighting against it. And so you're beginning to see that even the NDP, which really has been such a champion of this type of approach, have come to the conclusion that it is not working and it is punitive and it's hurting people in the pocketbook. I have no idea why that hasn't had an impact at the federal level. But there's two avenues to solve problems. One is through politics, the other is through the courts. We had some success in the past at getting other provinces to join us in our previous action, and I hope that others will join us in this one too.
I want to talk in a minute about some of those other court actions, but just before we move on, you say the NDP is moving over in Saskatchewan. There's a different kind of NDP in the prairies, I think. Mm-hmm. Jagmeet Singh is a very woke, progressive. I think he is probably worse in every way than Justin Trudeau on these things. Are there any signs, other than the federal Conservatives, that any other party would perhaps consider reducing the carbon tax? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Jagmeet Singh has expressed some skepticism about it. I presume the Bloc Québécois loves the carbon tax. Do you have any allies federally other than Pierre Poilievre?
Well, I mean, Pierre Poilievre is the obvious one. And I think, in fact, it's his leadership at the federal level that I think has created an environment where others are asking the same questions that he's been asking, and have come to the same conclusion that this isn't the way to try to reduce emissions. This isn't the way to, if you're concerned about emissions, there's better ways to do it rather than punishing your own citizens with excessively high consumer taxes that they can't avoid. That's the thing that I think has been the most frustrating, is that whether it's for diesel or gasoline, there just isn't another alternative that works in our cold climate. Electric vehicles may work in some jurisdictions and certainly in metro areas, but we've got a vast country with large distances between our municipalities. We've got a trucking industry where we have to get our products to market across vast distances that once again require diesel fuel. In Alberta, our home heating is almost 100% natural gas. Our electricity grid is 90% natural gas. And the federal government has put on a carbon tax that is 3 times the base cost of natural gas. It's absurd. And I think people are beginning to see that. There may have been more acceptance when it was a nuisance tax, when you saw it on your bill. Now it's a punitive tax, and people are reacting to that.
And it goes up every year, ironically, on April Fool's Day. You know, I think it was an Abacus poll that showed recently a major shift among young people for their top priority, and climate change or global warming absolutely plummeting. And I think it's because, you know, that's sort of a luxury issue to think that a tax will change the weather, and it's very abstract, whereas paying that price in this inflationary high cost environment, I think young people are now panicking about, can I afford a house? Can I afford groceries? I think that the biggest movers on the carbon tax are young people, and it's sort of the boomers for whom that's still a luxury issue. Do you detect any movement amongst young people? I think 10 years ago, youth would have been absolutely in lockstep with Greta Thunberg and Stephen Guilbeault. But I think in 2024, they're sober-minded and think we've got to cut taxes. Do you get that read from young people?
Yeah, completely. I mean, when you look at, first of all, food costs, 80% of every aspect of producing food requires fossil fuels, whether it's the fertilizer, whether it's the equipment to harvest the grain or do the seeding or dry the grain, whether it's taking the transportation to market, or even whether it's the grocery stores and how they're heated and powered. Every aspect of that has a fossil fuel attached to it, and so you're just compounding the cost. That's part of the reason why we have a crisis right now in the increase year over year in food. And then as well, I mean, I think our young people, they started going out there, renting houses and renting apartments, and they're seeing the rents go up. So they're thinking, well, maybe I want to buy a house one day. And of course, the interest rates have gone up dramatically because of the inflation crisis, again, created by Justin Trudeau with his loose money policy, but layered on top of that, the impact that these carbon taxes have. So I think that people pay attention to what's happening with their pocketbook. They aspirationally want to be able to own a home, have a good job, get married, have kids, be able to take their kids to soccer and hockey practice. And I think a lot of young people are saying, is that going to be out of reach for me? And that's something that the federal government has created. They own that. And so how do you begin to address it? Well, I think you start by getting rid of a tax that isn't serving its purpose and is causing this kind of harm. And then you can start addressing the issues that really matter to people.
I think earlier in your announcement, you mentioned that when Alberta got rid of its carbon tax, inflation went down. Here's a clip of that from today.
Or consider the savings in a time when Canadians are coping with levels of inflation that we haven't seen in decades. The carbon tax is adding to inflation. In fact, according to the Bank of Canada, the federal carbon tax increases inflation by 0.15% per year, year over year. But we also know that the impact that taxes have on inflation, because when we paused the collection of our 13-cent per litre provincial fuel tax, we saw inflation slow in our province. We've seen the same thing in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Imagine the impact on inflation if we removed 3 times that amount in 2030. The carbon tax on fuel will reach 39.6 cents per litre. According to the Canadian Energy Centre, the carbon tax will account for 24% of annual fuel costs. Imagine the savings to Canadians if their bill was a quarter the cost when they filled up. If the federal government is now saying that removing the carbon tax on home heating oil will lower costs, then this carbon tax exemption for Eastern Canada blows a big hole in their justification for the carbon tax. Furthermore, applying it unequally is unconstitutional, and it runs counter to Ottawa's own carbon tax legislation. Our end goal is the same as a growing number of Canadians from across the country: to get rid of the retail carbon tax. If Ottawa won't axe this heartless tax altogether, they can at least play fair when imposing it on Canadians. And that's what we'll be heading back to court to achieve.
Is Stephen Guilbeault reachable through any kind of dialogue or compromise or communication? Or is he like a zombie, a robot, like a Terminator? I wonder if he is just an ideologue, or is he a log-rolling, deal-making politician? What's he like on this stuff to deal with?
An ideologue. There's no question about it. And I've talked to others who have dealt with him. And in fact, some of my colleagues, Premier colleagues say, well, you can go and try to negotiate with this minister, but we haven't had much success. So lower your expectations. I've talked to members in the auto manufacturing field as well. They thought that they were working in good faith to see if they could come up with some way around the aggressive net zero electricity rules, and they had no luck. You look at even the approach that we took on trying to get something reasonable around the net zero power grid. We know that that's not possible in Alberta, with 90% of our grid being fueled by natural gas. At the time that we had just phased out coal, there's no possible way. We'd have billions of dollars in stranded assets. We'd have unreliability in our grid, and we'd have an affordability crisis. And we're not making much headway there either. And then we keep hearing that they want to put on an emissions cap, which we know would actually be a production cap on our energy. So it seems like, for some reason, that minister has been given carte blanche, whether it's emissions caps or methane caps or net zero power grids or net zero vehicles or net zero buildings and net zero homes. It seems to me that for some reason he has been able to direct the policy of the Liberals, and I think that they're foolish if they think that isn't a lot to do with the reason why they're tanking in the polls.
While we're on Guilbeault, before we move on, give me 1 minute about his mismanagement of the Jasper wildfire. We don't want to make that a partisan issue, but it is a fact, as parliamentary testimony has shown, that it was decisions made by Ottawa that just magnified everything that happened. Give us a minute on that, Premier.
Well, I can tell you, the province, we fight literally hundreds of fires a year. I think we had over 1,000 last year. Parks Canada only fights dozens of fires, and we were ready, on standby, to be called in to do unified command. And unfortunately, there were some decisions made, and we heard about it in the testimony, where it sounds like there were some structural firefighters who were turned away. Prior to that, though, there was also, and we've been raising it. In fact, I talked to my former environment minister. We were raising it with them since 2018, knowing that the pine beetle kill and the fuel growing up around Jasper was getting to a point where it was dangerous. And we were pleading with them to do something about it. So that goes back in our records to 2018. And we're not the only ones. Parks Canada scientists have also raised the alarm, not just with Jasper, but remember, we had a big wreck in Waterton Park as well. Right. And they're also concerned about Banff. And so we've seen that they just turned a blind eye to it. Look, when we have an old forest, when our forests get to be about 80 to 100 years old, they die. And when you've got a lot of dead trees, there's only a few things that'll happen. You either take them out mechanically so that they don't end up igniting. You do prescribed burns, so you get rid of that fuel, or nature takes its course. And so I don't think it's been a surprise to a lot of people who've been warning of this, that occurred. It's very disappointing. We're now working with the federal government to make sure that we can rebuild in a timely way, and we'll continue to do that. But we can't allow this to happen again.
I know you got to run. Let me ask one last question, because we're on the eve of your party convention in Red Deer. I'll be there along with Sheila Gunn-Reid, our chief reporter. I am astounded by the fact that your party constitution allows for a leadership review right after a successful majority government. And I'm even more astounded that there would be critics who would call for your defenestration. And this is not me being a fanboy. This is me saying, oh my God, what are you doing? You beat the NDP. You're running the most conservative pro-Alberta government imaginable. What's going on in the UCP, and what's your message to Alberta delegates who will be meeting in Red Deer in a few days? Give me a closing argument for you for that leadership review. I'm astonished by it, but maybe it's just a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. Give me 60 seconds on that before you go.
Well, look, we put forward a Bill of Rights so that people have the ability to make their own medical choices, including the choice to refuse a vaccine. We're bringing forward policies that will make sure that kids who are suffering with gender dysphoria don't prematurely make decisions that are going to prevent them from being able to have kids of their own one day. We support parental rights, and parents need to be included in all of those decisions. We've run balanced budgets for the last 3 years. We put money into savings, and we're continuing to have the best economic performance in the entire country. 100,000 new jobs that were created, mostly in the private sector. So I'm feeling like we're doing very well. We are leading the nation. What I worry about with Conservatives is they sometimes make the perfect the enemy of the good. There will always be little things that members think that we could move faster on, or we could have done it a bit of a different way. But I think that we've seen in other jurisdictions what happens when the Conservative movement splits. We just saw a result in Saskatchewan where the NDP sure got a lot closer than anybody's comfort. We saw as well in New Brunswick, where unfortunately Premier Higgs ended up losing as a result, I think, of losing of that vote split as well. So I want our movement in Alberta to stay united. I've been responsible in the past for seeing it divided, and I sure like it when our Conservative family is together under one roof. I think that is the pathway to success.
Yeah, I hope that the party is sober-minded, and we'll be there to report on it. Premier Smith, thanks very much for spending some time with us. Congratulations on this lawsuit. I believe that everyone should sue Justin Trudeau from time to time. I've done it once or twice myself. Good luck this weekend. We'll see you there in Red Deer.
You bet. Thanks, Ezra.
You're welcome. There you have it. Premier Danielle Smith of Alberta giving us the scoop on the new lawsuit. Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. Members get instant access to all of our shows, invitations to exclusive events, and access to our premium content like live event footage and documentaries you won't see anywhere else. Only Rebel News Plus members can join the conversation by participating in the comments section of our new website. That way you can have your say too. More than anything, though, you'll be able to take pride in supporting real, honest journalism, and you'll help our talented team continue to do the work to push back on the establishment. We really can use your help. We need it, in fact. So thank you, and enjoy Rebel News Plus.